everybody, this is the Wikstrand. So when you're talking about the three prongs of the terrific trident of the British crime movies, I will say that those are Snatch, Gentlemen, and Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, all directed by the same guy, Guy Ritchie. But if you wanted to make it a Mount Rushmore of British crime movies, you have to add Layer Cake to it. But Layer Cake does something that I think might be an even greater accomplishment, because apart maybe from Guy Ritchie, who has had a better debut film than Layer Cake? Considering how many fantastic movies he has done over the years, this is one of my favorite of his, and that is fucking saying something. But the question is, why is it so good and what it is about? That's what we're gonna find out today. This is Layer Cake. Mr. X, aka Daniel Craig, he is a cocaine dealer in London. He doesn't see himself as a drug dealer or a gangster or even a criminal. He just sees himself as a merchant of goods that aren't legal to sell yet. And he believes that someday, this thing will be legal because, the enormous amounts of money that the government can make from it. But he's also, thinking about, retiring from the business, even though he handles this in a very professional way and is very discreet. He doesn't like violence, he hates guns, and he's not your traditional drug dealer, so to speak. But just when he is, planning on, when he's going to retire from the cocaine dealing industry, one of his mid-level bosses that he talks to, Jimmy, tells him that he wants him to do him a favor. He wants Mr. X to find Eddie Temple's daughter who has gone missing. Eddie Temple is a friend of his, and he wants to help his friend. The thing is that his daughter is this junkie girl who has escaped from rehab and is now hanging out with some lowlife somewhere in London's junkie quarters. So Mr. X of course accepts to do this because it's his job to do whatever he's asked to do. But he's also preoccupied with another task, because a distance associate of his called Duke, a loudmouth idiot, wants him to help him sell a bunch of ecstasy pills which he has stolen in Holland. The thing is that he hasn't stolen these ecstasy pills just from anybody. It's a bunch of really unpleasant Serbs who has vowed revenge on those who has disrespected them in this way, and they're coming for Mr. X because they feel that he is as guilty to the theft of the pills as Duke is. So we have two different tasks that seemingly doesn't have that much in common, but is equally dangerous to his future. So will he be able to come out of this unscathed? Will he be able to find the daughter? Why is he being tasked for doing this? It is just because of some altruistic things that Jimmy has cooked up, or does he have alternative and ulterior and darker motives? Is he going to be able to, get rid of these pills and at the same time keeping the Serbs at a distance? This movie has so many interesting moving parts that, considering that it is only 105 minutes long, it really shouldn't work as well as it does. But it does, with a breakneck pace. They're able to easily navigate between all of these things and making this a very, very compelling story. Now, if you're going to compare this to, let's say, the Guy Ritchie movies, this movie is far less humoristic and takes itself more serious than those are, with a chillier atmosphere and a more serious and cold and distant tone to the whole thing, the movie becomes a quite different type of movie. Because if you watch this and thinking that you're going to see some very snappy dialogue and some quirky characters and a bunch of really, really surreal humor, you have come to the wrong place. It isn't without humoristic moments, but that is not the focus of the movie. And the dialogue is very snappy and very quick and very cool, but it doesn't feel forced and it doesn't feel unnatural. This movie as a whole feels more realistic than many of the other movies that I mentioned, even though it is an enhanced realism, if you will. But one thing this movie does better than any movie I've seen in this genre, and most movies in the action thriller genre, it is the following. When it comes to the use of violence, less is more in this movie, and that is especially true when it comes to one sequence. When a character is going to murder another character, we have so much, preparations before it happens, and the fear and the terror and the uncertainty of whether or not this character is going to do this thing. And then, the actual killing, it's over in a second. But then we go into this sequence where we see the aftermath, when the character is thinking what he has done and the emotional impact that this thing has caused said character. It is a sequence that I don't think I've ever seen before. Other directors would probably have skipped or trimmed down severely these sequences, but it adds cadence to the movie and it adds cadence to the character. So we have a bunch of very, very colorful characters, including a very young Tom Hardy as one of the associates of Mr. X. We have Colm Meaney, who's always a delight to see whenever he shows up, and I love Michael Gambon's character, and the interactions he has with Daniel Craig is absolutely astonishing. Sienna Miller is also very good as the girlfriend of Duke's, was it his cousin or was it his nephew? I can't quite remember. And Daniel Craig, by the way, steals her completely from this little weasel. By the way, speaking of Daniel Craig, this is the greatest performance that I think Daniel Craig has ever done. There is no if, buts or coconuts. Most importantly of all, this is probably the most important role that he has ever done. This movie probably led to the fact that Steven Spielberg called, so we got to have him in the movie Munich that came out a year later, and it was probably one of the reasons why he became James Bond a few years later, for the good and the bad of it. This is a very entertaining, very fast-paced movie that does not sacrifice individual moments for the fast pace it has, or doesn't stray too far away from the very, very interesting plot we have. They use things that happened decades ago that impacts the present day, which I thought was a very clever thing to do. Maybe they got a little bit clever with it, but I was totally okay with it. So the movie goes on, and then we end up in an absolutely magnificent finale to the whole thing. And the movie ends, but then it continues for about 90 seconds. And what happens during these 90 seconds is, I would guess, something that people has argued about ever since, because it is a ending that, in my opinion, damaged the movie a little bit. It puts at least a dent in the movie. Maybe if they wouldn't have had this ending, or if they would have had a more traditional ending, maybe I would have been annoyed by it and said, well, this was an ending that was a bit too cliched, and I've seen this too many times. Why can't they do anything unique, brave, or something that you wouldn't see coming? Because that is essentially what they do in this movie. And as I said, it is a unique and it is a logical ending. You can see it coming a mile away when you rewatch it. But it is one of these cases where I cannot quite decide how damaging it is, or if it is damaging. I didn't like it when I saw it the first time, but I have rewatched it a few times after this, and I know that it's coming and I can accept it, but I just think that I would have liked to see maybe something else. What? I don't quite know, but I did not love this ending. I think it is an interesting ending, and the ending that they had in the book is inferior to this thing. Maybe they could have done something other, something more vague, something more open. I don't know. Anyway, I've yapped too much about the ending to this movie. If you like, you know, British crime movies and you somehow have missed this one, this is an excellent movie. I love the tone, I love the atmosphere, I love the cinematography this movie has. It feels big despite, you know, not being this huge blockbuster type of movie. We have fantastic actors, we have interesting characters, and we have a story that moves along and takes different weird detours sometimes that keeps you guessing what's gonna happen next. And as I said, one of the greatest movies that Matthew Vaughn has ever done. I think that this movie is absolutely spectacular and I love this movie so much. An excellent soundtrack, fantastic editing, and a very memorable cast of characters. I give Layer Cake 93 points. It is not without its small little flaws here or there, but I think for the most part that this movie is damn near perfect. Except for the ending that puts a little dent to the whole thing, but maybe the dent is supposed to be there. Maybe it is supposed to have that thing that doesn't quite fit the rest of the movie. I don't know, but it's at least memorable. So I'll see you next time for Well So and So reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.